Check, check. Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Ready. How do you find your way around the city or around the state or around the country if you're traveling? Well, maybe you use some of the electronic maps that you find on your phone, but what happens if we had an EMP blast and none of that worked? Do you know how to read a map? We're going to talk about Mapping St. Louis, a history of the Gateway City in 40 rare maps on St. Louis in Tune. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune, and thank you for joining us for fresh perspectives on issues and events with experts, community leaders, and everyday people who make a difference in shaping our society and world. I'm Arnold Stricker, along with co-host Mark Langston. Mark Langston, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I like old-fashioned maps, so I'm kind of excited about the show today.
I do too.
You know, aeronautical charts. We used to use those.
You know, the maps that I'm most unfamiliar with are the maps of the sky.
The sky.
Yes. You know, like the constellations
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. I just never was able to kind of figure that out.
In my scouting days, we have an app where you can actually put it in there, and you hold it up to the sky, and it gives you all the constellations and things you're looking at.
Okay.
We do that for our astronomy merit badge.
Okay. I only got the Big and the Little Dipper. That was the only ones I ever got.
And where is the North Star?
It's at the end of the Big Dipper, kind of pointing this way, right?
I think it's the Little Dipper. I think it's the Little Dipper.
I don't know.
Okay,
See, I'd be lost.
You're going to be lost.
I wouldn't know the North Star.
And the moss is on what part of the tree?
The north side.
Good. Okay.
I do know that
so
one.
far, so good.
And solar panels on the north side, if you're in
Is that right?
the southern
Okay.
hemisphere.
See, I didn't know. That's something I didn't know. Okay. I'm learning things today. Okay. Wow.
Oh,
okay.
we learn a lot on this show. We also try to help people be civil.
Oh, it's about time.
If you see someone looking for a place to sit and you have an empty chair at your table, wave them over and offer them the seat. If you don't know the person, it's a great way to get to know someone new. Now, a lot of people, they really don't want to engage people they don't know. It might be just their personality type. It might be that they're just not comfortable talking to people and being outgoing. But, you know, when someone's looking for a place to sit and there's, you know, the place is kind of packed. Hey, we've got one right here. You know, come on over here.
I have no strangers when I'm around. My kids always say, "Dad's making friends again."
My wife says the same
Does
thing.
she say that about you?
She says the same
And I've
thing.
had more fun just talking to random people, and because nobody expects you to talk to them.
No,
you know, it's true.
And you can learn a lot from people, and that's how we have a lot of people on the show. I talk to people all the time.
I know.
We get finding out what they're doing.
I know.
It's kind of crazy. It's kind of like our guest today.
We're going to talk to Andy eventually, aren't we?
We are.
Just checking. Okay.
Andy Hahn's been on the show before, and he was on the show when we had Suzanne Corbett on with us. We talked about the
It was a feast for President Grant's birthday.
President Grant's birthday was. Yep. I'm trying to get. It's the table to the gilded table and the
from the farm table to the gilded
farm table to the gilded table.
That was just about 2 years ago.
Right. I can't remember. I can't read my writing. That was part of my problem. Farm table to the gilded table, and that show is on stlintune.com. You can check that out. That was very fascinating. And my wife and I, several weeks ago, went to the Campbell House, where Andy is the executive director of the Campbell House, and saw him there, and we went through that. And amazing place. I highly recommend, if you've not been to the Campbell House in St. Louis, you need to go.
Where is it? Where's it located?
It is on Locust Street, 15th and Locust Street.
Oh, okay.
And we will talk more about that. But Andy's here to talk about this book. It's brand new, folks. Matter of fact, it's still warm from the printer. I have to have some gloves on to hold it. It's called Mapping St. Louis, a history of the Gateway City in 40 rare maps by Andrew W. Hahn. Andy, welcome back to St. Louis in Tune.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
This book is crazy. And it's crazy good, folks.
I was going to say, hopefully in a good way.
Oh, in a great way, because I've never seen some of these maps before in my life. And not that I'm a map connoisseur. I do love maps. I'm kind of a nerd as it far growing up. I would read the Encyclopedia Britannica. And it sounds weird, but I would go through and learn things that way. And when I go through here, I read things that I've never known before. And there's a lot of pictures, there's a lot of words, but there are some things here that are they're just astounding about the city of St. Louis here.
Oh yeah, the history of St. Louis.
Why did you write this book?
Well, I have always been fascinated with maps from the time I was a little kid. In my grandparents' home in Webster Groves, they had a study, and on the wall of that study in the 1950s, they put on the wall a giant map of the world. And they just didn't like hang it. They used like wallpaper paste to like permanently affix it to the wall. So I grew up with that and was just couldn't get enough of it. They were big travelers. They would come back from a trip and my grandma would point out on the map where they had been. And when I was about 5 years old, I could, next to the map, there was this like bamboo stick and I could point out where Madagascar was and Norway. And, so that got me hooked on maps and just being interested in what they tell you about the world and the world today and history. And then when I started to work at the Campbell House, my job's all about history and involves a lot of maps of the city, maps of the West. And so these kind of passion kind of grew. And about 10 years ago, I thought that would be a cool book. You could tell the whole history of the city just through the lens of maps.
Right.
And that was the goal. And I think that's what I did.
That's very interesting. You're a seventh generation St. Louisan. I've
Yes.
never met a seventh generation St. Louisan.
Well, I think there's some that are 10th generation and
Wow.
more, but on my dad's side, he had an ancestor who was born here around the year 1800. And that's about the farthest I can go back in my family tree.
Oh my
So,
gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It is.
So we use crazy on this show. It's like unbelievable. That's that acronym there. So you were a student at St. Louis University. You interned at the Couples House. Now you got to listen to he's got a pedigree background, Mark, in history, and he loves houses. He interned at the Couples House. And then in 2003, he worked as director of the Campbell House Museum. And that's when you started there.
Sure.
And 1851 Townhouse in downtown St. Louis. You also serve on the American Association of State and Local History, Historic House Committee, and the board of Lafayette Park Conservatory and Friends of Tower Grove Park. You're really engaged in a historical aspect of St. Louis and kind of upholding that. Did that come from spending time at your grandparents and seeing the map and all that kind of history?
Certainly. History was always my favorite subject. I always did best in it. And I think that came out of that, those early days of learning about maps. And this room in my grandparents' house where the map was actually a library.
Okay.
The one wall was floor to ceiling bookcases. And so that just always got me reading and looking at books, looking at the atlas, pulling out the encyclopedia before you had a phone. And
Right.
that's how you got random facts. And now you just scroll.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, history has always been a passion. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to turn it into a career.
What a great book, though, that it touches on so much history of St. Louis and the way that it does it. It's fascinating.
And you start back in 1760s.
Correct. Yeah. The first map of St. Louis was made just a few years after the founding of the city. It was produced in 1767 by a Spanish officer who had been sent to St. Louis to figure out what the Spanish had. And it's the first map that shows the street grid of St. Louis, streets and blocks. It's not very detailed. It actually shows the whole confluence area. It goes down from the Merrimack River all the way up to Missouri, but right there in the middle is St. Louis.
Wow.
So that's a cool map. And what I love about that map is it actually shows in 1767, there were more people living on the Illinois side of the river than the Missouri side of the river. And people had been living here for many generations. But the founding of St. Louis started to bring people
West.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Gateway to the way. Yeah. And that's something.
And some of these maps are like full 2 pages, folks. Like I'm going to show you. This is that map that Andy was talking about here. And I'm trying to get some people salivating so they buy this book.
That's good.
There is just so much here. And where did you get access to these from? Do you own some of these, or
I own a
does
couple of
the
the
Campbell
newer,
House have some of these?
the
or-
Campbell House has some. I own a couple of the newer ones. That particular one actually lives in Madrid, Spain.
What?
It was made for the Spanish
Oh,
government because
right.
St.
Right.
Louis was part of Spain at the time,
Mhm.
and it was drawn and sent back to Spain, and it's been there ever since. And
How'd you find out about this?
well, about 100 years ago, it was quote rediscovered. Because through the 19th century and early 20th century, St. Louisans didn't even know this early map
Uh-uh.
existed. So I've learned about it from a guy named Charles Peterson, a book he wrote called Colonial St. Louis in the 1940s.
Mhm.
He has a really small black and white version of the map in that book. So I sought it out, and thanks to the wonders of the internet, it was relatively accessible.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And map skills are something that I guess it's still taught. My wife teaches social studies and history, so they still do,
Mhm.
compass rose and longitude and latitude and all that. And is it because of the advent of electronic maps that, we use, Google Maps and all those kinds of
Sure.
things, that we don't use maps anymore to track destinations or things like that? Is there something that can bring us back to that?
Well, I mean, I write in the preface of the book that maps are more accessible and more used today than they ever have been, because everyone has the most detailed atlas of the world in your pocket
Right.
at any second. I think the skill that's lost is using that map to orientate yourself in your present space, because your phone does that for you.
Right.
Your phone will tell you exactly where you are, and it will tell you exactly how to get to where you want to go. It will say, go 300 feet, turn left,
Right.
turn right,
Right.
everything you need to know. So that is a skill I think that's maybe lost a
Mhm.
little bit, or it's not as, people aren't as comfortable with it as they used to be. I think another skill that's lost is the idea of mental map making. And in preparing for the book, I read a couple articles by scientists who were really distressed that people aren't making mental maps like they used to. And an example of that would be, you walk to school every day and you have that kind of map in your head about, which the terrain and which way you turn and all that sort of thing. And people don't do that as much anymore, partially because of the phone. I've got 2 high school kids, and my daughter's a freshman, and I do carpool periodically, and there's 2 girls in the back seat, and the whole time they're doing this.
Yeah.
And they're not looking around. And
No.
when I was a kid, you'd be looking out the window and thinking,
Yep.
oh,
Yes.
Manchester Road.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
Right.
kind of learn the landmarks and that
Right.
sort of thing. So I always tell them, put your phone away.
Right. No, that's a great story. That's true.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. One of my favorite maps, I have many of them, but is a topographical map.
Mhm.
We actually have framed one and put it on. We have a vacation home, and it's on the wall at our
Yeah.
vacation home. It shows you are right here, but it shows the terrain. It shows the creeks.
Yeah.
And you don't get that. I don't get that when I look at an iPhone map.
No, you don't.
I don't get
it's the
that
world.
detail.
It flattens the world.
It does flatten the world. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And topographical maps are just like little stamps, I guess, of an area, and it really zooms in on it. I love maps myself.
Yeah.
Aeronautical charts, I love those too.
They have a power to draw you in.
Uh-huh.
I can't really explain it, but I've found in writing this book that a lot of people have that desire to, when you see it, you got to see it more. You got to study it more.
Right.
So
It's historical, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's present too.
Yes.
Uh,
Good point.
so they have this unique draw, I think, that very few things in the world do anymore.
And you can see some things that, like, I'm looking at the map, St. Louis in 1780 right now, that was done by August Shoto, or Augusta, some people might say. And is this Campbell's Gazetter of Missouri? Is that related to the Campbell?
No, it's not. No,
A different one.
So that particular map was reprinted in an early guidebook to St. Louis, for lack of a better description. If you came here as a traveler in the Gilded Age, you would buy this book, and it had a huge fold-out map, and that map is actually a little bit later in the book. But in the front of the book, just like a good guidebook would have today, it gives you a little history of the place. Who founded it, when did people start to live there, how did it grow, and that map was used to illustrate the kind of growth of St. Louis, because in 1780, the city was only 3 blocks wide from the river.
Really?
So it went as far as the old cathedral, and that was the edge of the city.
Wow.
Um,
We've come a long way, baby.
we've come a long way. Yeah. And it stayed that way for a fairly long time. For about the first 60 years of our history, the city didn't grow in size very much. It stayed pretty. There's another map from 1804, and the city's not a lot different.
Not that much different.
Yeah, it
And
hugs the riverfront, because the riverfront was the superhighway.
Right.
The riverfront is how you came and left St. Louis.
And this is all now the Gateway
Correct.
Expansion Memorial.
Yep, that's all the arch grounds, exactly.
That's unbelievable. I love to see different portions on a map of what it was then and what it is now. And you can see how, and this is great, folks, you can see how the city continues to grow. As Andy goes through this chronologically, he gives history, and he also gives, you can visually see. You're not only reading it, you're visually seeing it, which I like the pictures.
Yeah, you like
I do read, though.
And only maps can do that.
Yes.
Pictures can do that, but it's so hard to read a picture. And of course, in the early days, there weren't photographs. But when you can see it, flatten the world, like we said, and see it mapped out that way, you really get a sense of, oh, look, there's 6 more blocks here that weren't here 5 years ago, 5 years before. So they're special in that way, and a unique tool for historians.
And
It
even
is.
looking back when 1904 World's Fair, that was no man's land.
Right.
WashU admin building, that was just kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then when University City was established, that was like all farmland. And we think the city wanted to say, okay, we're going to stop here at Skinker, because that's about as far as we're going to
Did you
end up
call it
going.
Stinker?
Skinker.
Oh, I think it's Stinker.
No, Skinker.
Okay.
And you look now, and we just drive out 64, and
We just keep going and going and going.
Nothing going on there.
I know. Well, Kings Highway was considered like the 270. It was the outer road of the city at that time. Now, I'm from Maplewood, and I love the maps of Maplewood, because Maplewood, I guess, traded or sold a corner of Maplewood. So if you look at the old maps, it's almost a square. If you look at the new maps, you can see where there's a bite taken out of it, where they traded with Richmond Heights, I think. And the housing stock is different there too. They're brick, and Maplewood's mostly stick homes anyway. But the maps, seeing those maps, it's like you say, it's historical. It gives you kind of a historical perspective of what's happened and then where you are now today. And I think it's fascinating.
And maybe where you're going.
Yeah.
The last map in the book is from 2021. And it is the new St. Louis ward map. So for the first time in St. Louis's history, the political wards of the city were reduced. And so now, as of 2021, we have 14 wards instead of 28.
Thank goodness.
So it's making for a lot of efficiencies, but it redrew the map literally. And we're pretty lucky that they were quite careful in how they did it. The old wards cut up neighborhoods. They were very kind of willy-nilly, and they went to a lot of effort to preserve neighborhood boundaries so that, all of the Central West End is in one ward.
That's
and
good.
Before, I think it was in 3 different wards.
Some of these earlier designations on this ward had 4 wards downtown.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
Which was just like,
That's
what are you
crazy.
doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, makes no sense.
We're lucky we just have 2. So.
Yeah, so it is, that is, something that's new, and it seems like it's leading to efficiencies, and it's great that neighborhoods are kept together politically. But that's something we're going to watch and see where that leads.
See how it works out. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. We're talking to Andy Hahn about the book Mapping St. Louis, A History of the Gateway City in 40 Rare Maps. And it's available through Reedy Press. And we're going to talk in a little bit about where Andy's going to be, and you can see him, get the book signed, et cetera, et cetera. What's the rarest map in here, Andy?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably that early 1767 map from Spain. There's a couple other hand-drawn maps. The 1767 is a hand-drawn map. It's a manuscript. The one right in front of you from 1932, that's also a manuscript map, meaning that only one was created. Those are probably the rarest ones because most of them are printed and were printed for some use. And maybe only 10 were printed, but maybe 1,000 were printed. It just depended on the map and what the audience was.
And this is something I've seen on a lot of maps, historical maps, is they will have like some important places from the city that are kind of drawn in, maybe historic events that happened, maybe historic people that are put around the border. Is that very, very common or not common as you found?
I discuss this map as an example of a pictorial map.
Okay.
They're all different types of maps, and I wanted to include as many as possible in the book. And a pictorial map is not a map that is meant to be used for navigation. It's a map that's meant to tell a story, and part of the story is, of course, told through the map, but it's also told through pictures, either pictures on the map or pictures around the map. And that's what that map does. It talks about the history of the city. It gives historical facts in the border, but also illustrates historical scenes. So it illustrates the founding of St. Louis, early important buildings. It has another map in the border, that same map that we saw earlier from 1780 at the bottom. So it's a map that's trying to do more than just show streets and the river, because of course the river is the most prominent feature on any St. Louis map.
So you have historical maps. You have what are the kinds of maps?
There's maps for navigation.
Okay.
Maps that you would use to literally find your way.
Okay.
There are like travel maps, tourist maps, a map that a tourist might get. There are kind of scientific maps. An example of that would be the map in the book that illustrates the city water and sewer system. Now we take it for granted everyone has running water and a sewer. And that map is from 1884. The map, the water and sewer system. So that tells a unique story, that map was actually made for a medical convention here in St. Louis. There it is. So it's the next before this.
Wow! Look at that, Mark.
Oh my! Oh wow!
No wonder it's all torn up downtown.
Yeah.
So that map was made for a health, like a healthcare, public health convention here in St. Louis in 1884. And it was meant to show how the city was progressing in terms of getting its residents
sewer,
clean water and taking waste away. And it's color coded. There's 3 colors on there, but you'll probably note that when you just glance at the map that at least half of the city in 1884 has neither running water or sewers. So
what's the third color for? What was the third color?
So there's one color green. That means that area of town had water and sewer.
Okay.
Blue means it only had water and no sewer. And then there's kind of a yellow color, and that's only sewer and no water. So it was growing, and sometimes they didn't grow at the same pace.
I'm not sure what I'd want and not want if I was in there. Water is pretty important, but sewer is pretty important.
Yeah.
Sewers, I don't know. It's kind of tough.
I think I would go for sewer, actually.
Yeah, really. I get that.
You
Garbage,
can always
sewer,
collect water and rainwater.
Right.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
And then as part of that, like in 1884, then you go into a dialogue about the water history and the sewer history
to kind of
supplement there.
To just give people a snapshot. This was not meant to be a detailed study of any particular aspect of St. Louis history, but here's the map. We're going to look at this story through the lens of this map, and then I tried to tell a little bit of that story, in about 600 or 700 words.
So, are you trying to get people to do more investigation on their own from looking at this and reading this book, or what's the end goal?
I never thought of that, actually. I do hope that it really piques people's interest in the history of their city, whether they were born here or whether they, are relatively new here. So I'm hoping it just gets people thinking about the city they live in and all the different aspects of it, both past, and present.
Okay. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We're talking to Andy Hahn about the book Mapping St. Louis, and we're going to come back and talk more about that. We're going to take a little break here. This is Arnold Stricker, again with Mark Langston. You're listening to the U.S. Radio Network. The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune. Welcome back, folks, to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston.
Yeah, we're having fun.
We are. Andy Hahn's here talking about his book, Mapping St. Louis.
Andy, have you ever seen Big Bang Theory?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sheldon Cooper has an episode, Fun with Maps.
Oh, I have not seen that episode.
Is that right? You haven't seen it? Okay. It's a big episode.
Okay.
You should look.
I'm going to look. I'll search it out.
You should. Fun with Maps. He does a YouTube thing.
Okay.
And it's called Fun with Maps. It is really very well done. You would enjoy it.
I will search it out.
These are fun.
Fun with Maps.
So if you want to get the book or see Andy, get a book signing, he's going to do some presentations and book signings Monday, October the 14th at the Florissant Historical Society. Mm-hmm. That's the Gittemeyer House. You know, that house was in danger of getting knocked down. And I know it used to be, the barn was up there. Mm-hmm. They had a restaurant up there.
Right.
And that was vacated and the house
was kind of left vacant for a while.
Yes. So check that out. That's
they've done great work up there.
Yeah. 1067 Dunn Road in Florissant. That's October the 14th. October the 20th. He's going to be at a place that he doesn't know anything about. That's the Campbell House Museum. And we'll talk more about the Campbell House. Another at the Stoop Pavilion at Tower Grove Park. That's November the 3rd. November the 6th at the Landmarks Association of St. Louis. I'm not familiar with that. That's 1805 South 9th Street. We ought to talk about that. The Thomas Sappington House. Know where that's at? Right by that on the Grants Trail. Mm-hmm. That's Saturday, November 16th. That's a great day. That's my wife and I anniversary.
Okay.
Kern Pavilion at Lafayette Park. That's Sunday, November 17th. That's near the boathouse up there. The Campbell House Museum again on November 24th. January 11th, the Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site. February 6th, the Missouri History Museum. And lastly, but not least, February 16th at the Carondelet Historical Society. And we'll post that on the podcast page, and you can check those out, and want to encourage you to go to see those. So I just kind of flipped open the book to this page, Mark. It's the 1907 fire insurance map. I'm like, what in the world? And you were pointing out at break, Andy, about like there's various colors here, but tell about the detail.
So these maps were created by companies to help insurance companies assess the risk of insuring a property. So, if back in the day, before Google Street Views and Google Satellite Views, which insurance companies use all the time, if you wanted to have insurance carried on your property, they would want to know, well, what am I insuring? How big is it? Where is it? What's it made out of? So on and so forth. So there were companies that specialize in making maps that told that story. And they go back as far as the 1870s, and they map out the city in great detail. Not only do they show the streets, of course, but they show every building plotted on that street. They give the address of that building, and then there's a little code in there that will tell you all sorts of things. What's the building made out of? Is it brick? Is it stone? Is it wood? What is the roof made out of? Is the roof tar? Is it slate? How many stories is it? Where's the closest fire hydrant? All this type of detail, which has proved invaluable to historians to help us see what our cities are missing, what had been there. So it's a really cool set of maps. And through this map, I tell the story of City Hall.
Yeah.
Because City Hall in the early 20th century was brand new. A lot of people don't realize it took 10 years to build St. Louis City Hall, a gorgeous structure.
I had no idea.
Not because construction was slow. It's just because the city only released so much money every year for the construction.
So nothing's changed, has it? I'm surprised it's even complete now. Did I say that?
No, Arnold's not bitter.
But after 10 years, they eventually finished it and dedicated it. And we're lucky to have such a gorgeous structure.
It is. And it's amazing to see all these homes right across the street.
So this is a parking lot today. This is the
We seem
west
to love
side.
parking lots down
We do, yeah.
Wow.
It's just amazing.
I've noticed some of these did they ever do anything with distances? I'd bring out a compass and some of the maps I use. And some of the old maps, though, I'm going, how can I tell a distance, like a mile or whatever?
So this map from 1882 does just that.
Yeah.
Ringing the circle, ringing the center of the city. Of course, the center of the city is where the arch is, the nucleus of the city. There's a series of concentric rings that fan out that will tell you how many miles. And this is actually a tourist map. And so that map was meant to, when you bought it, it was folded. And if you look carefully at this illustration, you can see all of the creases in the folds.
And those were,
and you can see these rings, and that tells you how many miles you are from the center of the city. So I think each one of these is 2 miles, if I'm not mistaken.
Fascinating. Okay. Because I wasn't seeing a lot of that, and now, well, there they are. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah,
and you could see in this map from 1882, what we now consider kind of the outer ring of the city of St. Louis is mostly empty. What's now St. Louis Hills, those whole neighborhoods don't even exist yet.
And it has a street index on it also, which becomes probably a lot more prevalent as the city grows and develops.
And there's more streets. Yeah.
And these are very famous, these pictorial viewpoints. They're like bird's eye views of the city.
Yeah. And for that map, I didn't actually choose one of the viewpoints. I actually chose the key that is literally the key to understanding this work. It's a map of the city shown flat, but also shown in perspective, the same perspective as the views. And that map is sliced up into 110 squares. And each one of those squares is numbered, and that's the plate to help you navigate yourself through the book.
And they really get into the detail of that.
Yes, it's an amazing work. It is. Someone needs to write a work just on that book because it's an unbelievable.
That's the Compton and Dry
record of our city, exactly, from 1875.
You see these sometimes in antique stores, the plates or the reproduction of the plates. And the books are very expensive if you get them at an auction or something like that.
Oh, is that right?
But you can go, that building's still standing and seeing what it looks like, or seeing what the downtown area, like this particular view that I'm looking at on page 54, it shows river boats down on the levee and multiple kind of boats and people unloading things. And I see the old cathedral is in this particular, and the planter's house is there I think that's the Planters House right there.
That's the Merchants Exchange, actually.
Okay, there we
the
go.
Planters House would just be a little bit west.
Okay.
Further. Yeah.
Did they have a schedule to redo maps like every year, every 2 years? Was there any kind of, was it just
Well, I guess it depends on
haphazardly?
depends on the type of map. The street department here in the city of St. Louis maintains the official map of the city,
Okay.
and they update that annually.
Okay. Have they always done that?
Since the late 19th century, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of history.
Yeah, and that official map of St. Louis, the most important thing about that is the fact that all the block numbers are noted. And the block numbers, every block in the city of St. Louis is given an official number. And that's how all city services, real estate records, all those things refer to that block number, because you can't really use an address because addresses change over time.
Correct.
The street name can change.
Correct.
Even the number of a building can change over time, but the block numbers are constant.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. If you go online on the city's real estate site and you plug in an address, it gives you several kind of different maps at the very bottom as you scroll down, and it will show that residence in conjunction with the rest of the neighborhood, et cetera, like that.
Wow.
And usually one of the first things on the description is block number, and it's a 3 or 4 digit number.
I have seen that. That's interesting.
I wonder if they keep a map of the potholes.
I kind of doubt it. It would be a very complicated.
He's not bitter.
Detailed map.
We're going to put a steel plate out in front of your house.
Yeah, talking about the steel plates, they're wanting now to. There's I was reading this morning.
We have a map of steel plates.
That there is in front of the Board of Aldermen was introduced that rather than put the plates on top of the pavement, they want them so the pavement is level with them. And the only reason Spire said that we don't make them levels because we're not required to. But in other municipalities and other cities, we are required to. So,
why not?
I don't think we're hard enough on our utilities to keep our streets.
And also was that you can't tear up this brand new street that we paved until 5 years go by.
Oh, is that right? Wouldn't that be nice?
Because common things as we pave this, and then 2 days later we're tearing it up or we're marking it up with.
Why don't they fix it before they do it? Okay, here we go. Taking one of those exit ramps, Andy.
One of the things that has been fixed up very nicely is the place where Andy is director. Is it director or executive director?
Executive director.
Executive director is the
got
Campbell
big
House.
title.
Give us a little history of the
big
Campbell
title.
House. And you've been there a long time, and it is a wonderful, wonderful, I don't want to call it is a museum, but it's a house of history.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work there for over 20 years.
What?
Now.
Get out of here.
He doesn't look that old, does he?
No, he doesn't. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really great.
So 20 years of my
wow.
the bulk of my career has been spent there, and it is a special place. As you said, it's not just a museum and it's not just a house. It's in many ways kind of a living, breathing place. Even though the people that live there have been gone a very long time, the story of St. Louis lives on in what they left us, in their furniture, in their carriages, in their papers. So we're open to the public 5 days a week, and people come down and visit us. And the visit to us is maybe not like a lot of museums, because at the Campbell House, you're greeted at the front door, and a docent actually walks with you through the entire building. So everyone gets a guided tour. And I know you were just there recently, and I think you will agree that really makes it extra special.
Yes.
It's one thing just to walk in a room and kind of look around, and but when there's someone there to tell you,
right,
what was that room used for, or what happened in that room, or what's so interesting about that chair, that's what we do the best.
Or gee, isn't it wonderful that President Grant was a dinner guest here?
In that house.
Yes. And that he actually went out on the front porch or the front area when a band was playing out there and people were coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he waved to the crowd, and there was supposedly the newspaper talks about 5,000 people out in front of the house. They knew the president was there, and everyone wanted to get a glimpse of him. And he stepped out and he waved. And this is quoted in the newspaper, and how the reporter got this. Maybe he just made it up. But standing next to him was Mrs. Campbell, Virginia. And she said to him, or he said to her, "You have no idea how exhausting this is." Just to be feted, and
Right.
and Mrs. Campbell supposedly replied, well, General, it's just to honor the people who love you so.
Yeah. Good answer.
Yeah.
That was a very diplomatic and very good answer. And maybe the reporter was standing right there under them. I don't know, but I've always wondered how did they get that?
Yeah. Had one of those miracle ears.
Right. Yeah, right.
I think what's very special about it is when you look at that house, that was the affluent area of St. Louis, and it was originally called Lucas Place.
Exactly.
And it's now Locust Street. But the street was lined with these houses, and now it's the only one.
Wow.
The only one. And you have, and what was around it was one of the first high schools, west of the Mississippi?
The first high school west of the Mississippi opened in 1856. The St. Louis Art Museum was up the street.
Right.
Washington University was literally just around the corner.
Tear it all down.
And it is the only representative house of that time that was considered kind of out in the boonies.
Yeah, it was a mile from the river. And when it was built, people thought, why would you want to live so far away from
the river?
All the action?
Yeah.
A mile.
Right.
But this is before streetcars, and you walked everywhere.
Yeah, you had to walk a mile.
It has the original stone out front. You see this at Lafayette Square also, where it was a carriage step. So you would step on the stone, and then you could step up into the carriage.
Yeah, because the carriages have big wheels, and they're much higher off the ground than any SUV.
they have some carriages at the Campbell House. Very interesting.
We have the carriages. Yeah.
Encourage everyone to go.
Wow. Please. Yeah. It's open Monday through Friday?
Monday? No, it's open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, and Sundays noon to 4.
Okay, good. Yeah. So
and you can literally go like we did. We just went right up, knocked on the door.
No.
A docent answered and took us on the tour.
Yeah. And the end of the year, we have a couple special things. The last 2 weeks of February, we recreate Robert Campbell's funeral. He died on October 17th. And like most people, he was buried from home. And because he was a prominent St. Louis, and the newspaper covered in great detail his funeral. I mean, it is like 2 columns. They're like this long. So we recreate that. There's a coffin in there and flowers and everything, black crepe draped. And so we do that through Halloween, and it culminates in our twilight tours with the Morning Society of St. Louis the Friday before Halloween. And then from mid-November through mid-January, we have our old-fashioned Victorian Christmas.
I don't think I knew how influential he was nationally at the time, not only financially. He was like one of the richest men in the country, and then his influence. Can you just give us a little bio about Mr. Campbell?
He was an Irish immigrant. He came to St. Louis as a teenager. This was over 200 years ago. He was 19 when he arrived here, and he made his first career and a name for himself in the fur trade. That involved going west to the Rocky Mountains where the beavers were. That was the most valuable fur. And that first trip involved a 9-month walk one way from St. Louis.
A walk.
They walked because the horses were loaded down with all their goods that they were going to supplies and everything they were going to trade with. So they walked next to the horses.
Wow.
Eventually, he and a partner named Bill Sublette would start their own company. They would build a place called Fort Laramie, which became the halfway stop on the Oregon Trail. Sublette and Campbell would help found Kansas City, Missouri. After Sublette died, Robert would continue on his own. He got involved in banking and steamboats and eventually the railroads. And at the end of his life, he owned the largest hotel in St. Louis. It was called the Southern Hotel.
And he was like one of the original mountain men.
Yeah, he was one of the first white Americans to see the Grand Tetons and the Great Salt Lake and the geysers of Yellowstone. When he was going out there, the historians describe the Rocky Mountains as a mystery, to the point where they make the comparison that we knew more about the moon when we sent men there than they knew about the Rocky Mountains when the mountain men went there. It was that unknown. And of course, the trip to the moon was a lot faster than it was the Rocky Mountains. Yeah. We figure a 9-month walk one way.
Wow. Yeah. Oh yeah. They had to come back, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, back was easier because you could float back.
Right.
But yeah, it was not for the faint of heart, for sure.
Cannot imagine.
Is there a surprise in here?
a surprise.
Like I look at these, I thought these maps were very interesting where they talk about densities. This is the density of the Negro population, trends of population, suicide rates that are mapped in here.
What?
Rentals. And this is the Irish population.
Well, I think that set of maps is the most powerful. And the one that I feature in particular in the beginning of that section is what's called the Red Line map.
Oh,
that was the map that really enforced segregation in St. Louis. That map was created from the 1930 census. And the name of the map is Distribution of the Negro Population of St. Louis. And in 22 districts, they plotted out how many residents in that area of this city were Black. And what the city officials and real estate agents did is they selected some of those districts, and they literally on this map drew red lines around the borders. And if you were a person of color in St. Louis before the 1960s, you could not buy property outside of those lines. So that's a pretty powerful map. I mean, it really shows that, if you were Black, you could live here, but not there.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it has percentages here also.
Yeah. So that's a powerful set of maps, those statistical maps from the 1930 census.
Wow.
We've come a long way in some things. This particular map I'm looking at is an aerial. It's the Adult Education Council of Greater St. Louis. What does this map tell us, Andy?
That map is interesting for a couple different reasons. One, it's in this crazy perspective.
It is.
It's not just looking down, flatten the map. It's kind of taken the map and tilted it and created this really, I find it kind of uncomfortable to look at almost, especially when you look at the western part of the city, because it seems like distorted almost.
Yes, it is.
But that was the artist's intention, not necessarily to make it uncomfortable, but to create that kind of perspective. And the goal of that map was really to illustrate the educational opportunities in St. Louis in those years right after World War II. So where all the schools were, whether it was a high school or a university, where you could take classes like at places like at the YMCA. It even notes on that map where the bookmobile stops are.
Love it. I used to love the bookmobile. I don't know if they even do it anymore.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
I love that too.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things.
Is there anything you haven't covered in here? Like we have the educational.
Oh,
we
sure.
have the real estate.
It was actually really difficult to winnow it down to 40 maps.
Really?
There are hundreds and hundreds.
What are some ones that got left out?
Well, so they either got left out because there wasn't a good map for it. There's no maps that talk about religion or sports or things like that.
Oh, those would be neat.
Yeah,
that would
but I don't know of any maps that really tell
either.
those stories.
The archdiocese have some.
They
maps?
probably might have one. I bet you they do. And maybe that's for the second volume 2.
Volume 2, yes, that's right.
But there's not a topographical map in there. We talked about that.
Right.
I just ran out of room. It would be really interesting to see a topographical map of the city because there's high ground. Very close to here, just up the road at the Compton Hill Reservoir.
Right.
That's the high ground in the
point
city.
In St. Louis.
And then there's low ground. Down along the River Des Peres, down along. The Mississippi, right through the center of town,
right?
The old Mill Creek. So,
yeah, the high point is across from the St. Louis, the Arsenal Hospital, right? There was a hospital there it was essentially the prostitute hospital where they would treat. It was the hospital for, I think it was actually called the Ill Repute, Hospital of Ill Repute.
Okay.
And it got knocked down, but there's a park there right now. That is the highest point in St. Louis.
Yeah. Is that right?
Sublet Park.
Yeah, Sublet. Yeah.
And then there's a street called Plateau. I know. I've been on that street.
Right.
It's way up there.
Right.
Yeah.
You go on that street, you can see forever.
Yeah. The northwest part of the city, there's a neighborhood called Cote Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really high part of the city as well. There was a big open plain there historically, and that's where the wagon trains set out from. That's on an earlier map.
What?
So,
yeah. I like topographicals.
Gosh.
Fun with maps.
Well, I had a question and it's just eluded me.
It eluded you.
It eluded me. And that's not the word of the day.
Wow.
You have a map of the cyclone, the Great Cyclone in 1896.
That's a cool map because that was a map that was rushed to be made. So on May 27th, 1896, a cyclone ripped through St. Louis. It is to this day the second most destructive tornado in American history in terms of loss of property and property value.
Wow.
And just like today, when there is a horrible disaster that's newsworthy, people want to know all about it, right? The news trucks are right there.
Right.
Well, they didn't have news trucks. So what happened is photographers went to work. They took pictures of all this destruction. There's dozens of different books that show photographs of the tornado. There were newspaper accounts, of course. People then would compile those newspaper accounts into a book, and someone made a map. And he took a map that already existed, an existing map. And basically what he did is he had printed on top of that map this red splotch. And the red splotch shows the path of destruction of the tornado. And it starts in the Clifton Heights neighborhood, and the twister is fairly small. But by the time it reaches about Kings Highway, it gets a lot bigger. And by the time it reaches Jefferson Avenue, it's huge, and it just cuts a path of destruction. I think it's about 25 blocks wide, and it just, leveled big sections of
and that was the main portion, because there's areas around that still got
some damage, right? But inside those red lines is where you see devastation, houses, with no roof and 2 walls missing, that sort of
the
thing.
Question I was going to ask you that eluded me: how long did this take?
Well, I've been thinking about it for 10 years, but in terms of sitting down and working on it, it took me about 6 months.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And how many hours a day?
About 8.
Wow, 8 hours a day for 6 months.
Full-time job there.
I would come home from work, and then I would sit at my desk.
Oh, the family loved you.
My wife says,
"Who are you?
You just disappeared for a while." I would take a break here and there, but there was some pretty intense weeks where I just came home and I sat at my desk all day.
There's times when you're kind of in a groove, and you kind of have to keep going.
Yeah, and when like any project, it was hard to get started. It was really hard.
Oh yeah.
But once I got going, it just kind of
don't want to quit.
Yeah.
Well, you can, if I missed some questions for you folks, you can ask Andy at some of these places. Monday, October 14th, the Florissant Historical Society, the Gittemeyer House. October the 20th at the Campbell House. November the 3rd at the Stupp Pavilion at Tower Grove Park. He's also going to be at November the 6th at the Landmark Association of St. Louis. That's on South 9th Street. The Thomas Sappington House on November 16th. November 17th, the Kern Pavilion at Lafayette Park. Campbell House, November 24th. Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site, January 11th. Missouri History Museum, February 6th, and the Carondelet Historical Society on February 16th. I'll post those on the podcast page, stlandtune.com, and you can find that information. Andy, thanks for coming in and talking to us about this.
It's a great pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys again.
What a great book.
Really appreciate it.
Glad you're enjoying it.
Highly recommend it. I love that kind of stuff. Mark, and do you have is this the day of maps or something? Is there a map day?
I haven't seen, no, we have Love Note Day, which goes with Lumberjack Day.
Okay.
Send your lumberjack.
How you go from one to the other, I know. National Compliance Officer Day, which is your favorite, I know.
Wow.
Yeah. Key Lime Day. Do you like key lime pie?
I love key lime pie.
Really? This is your day, brother. National Dumpling Day.
All those things are today?
Yes. Oh. What do you do? I know. This is your Congress working.
Okay.
Yeah, or your state legislature.
This is what they
I know what you do. You get your compliance officer a key lime pie, right?
Yeah. That's it. That's the bribe that you want to do. I know it. Coming up, American Indian Day, which is good. I like Hug a Vegetarian Day. Do you know any vegetarians? I know one.
I know quite a few.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
I know one guy that will not eat anything with eyeballs.
I probably know more vegetarians than I do vegans.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I thought the eyeball thing was interesting because some vegetarians will eat fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know one that says if it's got eyeballs, I'm not eating it. Yep. This is what things we talk about. Morning show host day. Here we go.
That's us.
Yeah. It's only a couple of more. National Brave Day, Chocolate Milk Day. You like chocolate milk?
Love chocolate milk.
Yeah. And National Corned Beef Hash Day. Yum.
Yeah.
Isn't that? Yeah.
That's good stuff.
All right. That's it. Yeah.
Well, did you know that the first 5 days after the weekend are the hardest?
True.
And then there was the note, the tip that was left for the waitress.
Mm-hmm.
The bill was $32.76, and the tip was, "Don't call my husband sweetheart."
Oh yeah, love that. Okay.
And a lot of times the weather people, they'll give out the temperature and then the wind chill, especially like if it's in the wintertime.
Right.
The weather guy who figured out the wind chill, he died. He was 86 but felt like 75.
What is wrong with him?
And a man asked his wife, "What would you do if I won the lottery?" And she replied, "I'd take half and leave." "Great," he said. "I won $12. Here's $6. Stay in touch."
Sorry, we're jumping the gun on some of those. I'm sorry. You don't have more, do you?
Yes.
No. Please tell me no.
Godzilla. I love the Godzilla movies. I remember growing up as a kid, you'd see the Japanese Godzilla shows.
When the mouths
we saw.
are moving and then
And it was kind of
comes
weird. But the new Godzilla movies I really like.
Uh-huh.
And Godzilla didn't win an Oscar until he was 70 years old and had starred in 38 movies. Never stop following your dreams.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's see here. What
There's
we got
more.
here?
See, this is Andy. This is the problem here.
I hate when people suggest that I get a job doing something I love. No one is going to pay me to binge watch crime shows on Netflix and nap all day.
Wait, I happen to like Bosch.
Halloween candy is like, it came out like after the 4th of July, it seems like.
Oh, my wife won't let me buy it.
So the Halloween candy's on sale right now, folks. But no, you should not buy it. It's a trick. Buy it now and you'll shame eat it on the couch. You'll have to buy it all over again. It's very clever, these candy companies.
Yeah.
But you can't fool me a 14th time.
Wait. Take a bow, will you?
Okay. Well, I guess I better stop there, Mark, while I'm
Are
ahead.
you really going to stop there?
I'm actually going to stop there.
No, I don't believe it.
So it's been fun having Andy on the show. And come back anytime.
Oh, thank you.
Especially when you get volume 2 out.
Yeah.
We really want to have that.
Yeah,
and don't wait 10 years to do that.
No, I won't. I won't.
And don't make your wife mad. 8 hours a day.
She wasn't too mad about it.
Okay.
She still talks to me.
But folks, you need to get to the Campbell House down on Locust Street, 15th and Locust. Please do that.
You can buy the book there.
Yes, you can.
I'll get it signed, maybe.
Definitely.
I like
Andy
that.
is there occasionally.
Nothing like a signed book by the author.
Yeah.
That's true. And we'll post those other dates and places on the podcast page. Well, that's all for this hour. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can listen to additional shows at stlintune.com. Consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue to grow. I want to thank Bob Berthasell for our great theme music, our guest, Andy Hahn, and our co-host, Mark Langston. We thank you for being a part of our community of curious minds. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network. Remember to keep seeking, keep learning, walk worthy, and let your light shine. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.